We live in this super globalized world now, right? So working with people from all over the planet is, well, it's just the norm. But that also means you're trying to navigate this minefield of cultural differences. And we've all been there, haven't we? That moment where you're just completely confused because your ways of working just do not line up. So what's really going on when cultures clash at work? Let's dig in. Okay, so let's rewind a bit. Back in the 90s, there was this really powerful idea that took hold: the borderless world. The dream was, that technology and business would just kind of dissolve national boundaries. We'd end up with one big, seamless global marketplace. And in this perfect new world, we wouldn't be American workers or Japanese workers. We'd all just be global workers. But is that what really happens? I mean, seriously, when a team from, say, Tel Aviv starts working with a team from Texas, do their national identities just poof, vanish? Yeah, experience tells us that's a big no. In fact, a lot of the time, the exact opposite happens. And that tension right there between the dream and the messy reality, that's what we're going to unpack. All right, so to really get this, we got to start with the classic way of thinking about culture. For decades, really, the main idea, the one most people know, is to think of culture as a kind of mental software, like an operating system that's just running in the background of our minds. The famous social psychologist Geert Hofstede put it perfectly. He called it the collective programming of the mind. Think of it like this: it's the unwritten rule book you pick up as a kid, from your family, at school, in your community. It's not genetic, it's totally learned. And this software is what shapes how we automatically think, feel, and act. And this model, it's often described as being like an onion. You've got these layers, right? On the outside, you have the stuff you can actually see, the symbols like flags or clothing, the heroes, the role models everyone looks up to, and rituals like how you greet someone. But when you peel all that back, you get to the core, the part you can't see, and that's values. These are those super deep, unconscious beliefs about what's good versus evil or right versus wrong, and that hidden core, it's what drives the whole shebang. Now, don't get me wrong, this software model is super useful. It gives us a sort of map, right? It helps us guess where we might see differences in things like communication or how people treat their boss. It answers the what question: what are the differences? But it doesn't tell the whole story, not even close. And to see why, we've got to look at a real-world example. So let's dive into this fascinating case study. It's about a merger between two high-tech companies, one from Israel and one from the US. And this, my friends, is where the nice, clean, theoretical map of culture slams right into the messy, complicated reality of an actual workplace. Okay, so on paper, the official story was that this was a merger of equals. But down on the ground, everyone at the Israeli company, let's call them Izercom, knew it was really up. They were buying their American competitor, Ameritech. And this little detail, this power dynamic, it's absolutely crucial for understanding everything that's about to happen. So, what do you think happens next? You've got two groups running on supposedly different cultural software, and you try to mash them together, especially when one side clearly has more power. Well, if you just go by the software model, you'd probably predict some misunderstandings, some friction, right? All based on those pre-programmed differences. But what the researchers on the ground actually found was way, way more interesting. Almost instantly, something interesting happened. The employees on the Israeli side started talking about their new coworkers, but they didn't use their names or their job titles. They just called them the Americans. And as you can see from this quote here, this wasn't just a harmless label. It was a way to immediately draw a line in the sand. It created a very clear us versus them before the conversation even started. And it got even more intense. Check out this exchange. The engineers take a perfectly normal name, Harold, and they turn it into a generic category, the Heralds. They're literally erasing individual identity. Their new colleagues aren't unique people anymore. They're just faceless examples of a national type. A specific person becomes just one of them. And this is the central mystery. Instead of blurring the cultural lines, the merger actually made them thicker, bolder. The Israeli employees weren't just passively running their cultural software. No, they were actively, and it seems strategically, amping up the differences between them. Which leads to the million-dollar question: why? Why would they do that? Okay, to answer that why, we have to look at this from a totally different angle. We need a new perspective. So, what if culture isn't some fixed program that just runs automatically? What if it's more like a toolkit? A collection of ideas, stories, and symbols that people can actively pick and choose from to get something done. This is the whole idea behind what's called social construction. Basically, it argues that your national identity isn't just a fixed thing that you are, it's something you actively do. People use it like a resource, especially in situations where there's a struggle for power or status. Sound familiar? You can grab these cultural ideas to draw boundaries and to figure out where you stand in the pecking order. And this is where it all clicks into place. This slide really shows you the strategy behind all those stereotypes. So when the Israeli employees would say things like, oh, we're crazy workaholics, but they just work 9 to 6, that wasn't just them making an observation. It was an argument. They were using that stereotype to make a case that they were the more committed ones, the more valuable employees for the new combined company. Every single one of these stereotypes had a specific social purpose in this internal power game. So when you get right down to it, all this talk about culture, it wasn't really about describing the Americans. It was about defining themselves. By painting the Americans as these formal, less committed workers, they were basically building up their own identity. They were positioning themselves as the more dedicated, the more agile, the more authentic employees, the ones who really deserved to be running the show. Culture became a weapon in a fight for status. So we've gone on a bit of a journey here, right? We started with this simple map of cultural differences and ended up with a much, much richer picture of how those differences actually get used and what they mean in the real world. Let's put these two views right next to each other. On one hand, you've got culture as software. That view sees culture as this fixed, stable thing that causes behavior and just needs to be managed. It answers the question, what are these people like? But on the other hand, you have culture as a toolkit. This sees culture as fluid and dynamic. It's a resource people use, a tool we need to interpret. In this model, it answers a much more interesting question. Why are they acting this way right now in this situation? Okay, so what's the big takeaway from all of this? Here it is. Culture is not just some pre-written script that we're all forced to follow. People are smart. They actively use cultural ideas to make sense of their world, especially in messy situations like a merger. They use them to draw those us versus them boundaries. And yeah, they often use them to compete for status and power. And what that means for you is, if you really want to understand a culture clash, you can't just look at some chart of national traits. You have to look at the context. You have to understand the power dynamics of that specific moment. So, the next time you're in a situation and you think, this is a culture thing, I want you to stop and ask yourself a question. Are you just watching a pre-written program run, or are you watching a smart, strategic person pick up a tool from their cultural toolkit to try and get something done?